Hello and welcome to episode one of the Just Average People podcast. And with me today, I have my wife, Maimuna, who I lovingly call Mimi.
Hello,
And so, do you want to introduce yourself? What do you do? What's your
I
job?
am a senior telephony engineer.
Senior telephony engineer. Okay, then, so one, how old are you? And
I
two, what does that entail?
I am 26 years old, and my job entails um, looking after the Cisco platforms within the company. So managing the customers' needs and configuring any new requirements.
Okay, so you said you're a senior telephony engineer, or if we just ignore the telephony part, you're a senior engineer. If people hear that, they're probably going to think that you've got at least a bachelor's degree. Obviously, I know that's not the case. Do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Yes, so I don't have a degree. So basically, I initially wanted to go into radiography. But when I studied science at college, I realized that wasn't what I wanted to proceed into. I had a family member who was already into the networking field who advised for me to go ahead and look into the courses and the direction of and the path of that. So I self studied. I downloaded Cisco's books and the blueprint for the exam for the CCNA, which is the networking exam, and obviously self studied after completing my A levels. And after doing so for a good few months of just solid studying, I went for a junior role based in Sheffield and I got that. So from there on, I've been working for 5 years and I was initially a network engineer who transitioned into unified communications, well, I simply said telephony. So, yes.
Okay, that sounds good. Obviously, because you didn't go down the degree option, but you know some people that did. Would you say the route you went down was easier, harder, or just different?
Mm, I'd say different. I've been working for 5 years, and in my you know the different jobs I've had, I've met people who have either gone through the degree path or not, and both have had to get the qualifications and experience necessary. So if I met people who had gone to uni and spent X amount of years, they still had to come out of university and get the required Cisco qualifications, whereas someone like me who didn't go to university, I still had to prepare for those qualifications as well. So it's the same, but I would say my path was, I wouldn't say easy. I think I just got lucky, and I think definitely I just got lucky because I knew people who were, let's say, about 5-10 years older than me who were at a lower position than myself. So I, was very lucky that the job that I went to didn't entail me sitting at a service desk, picking up phone calls and logging tickets. I was able to, go headfirst into like a job where I was hands on the equipment and configuring switches and routers and, doing stuff for the business itself.
Okay. And because you don't have a degree, when you've been at your jobs, have the vast majority of your team known that you don't have a degree and you just got the actual networking or the telephony qualifications, or are they just under the assumption that you've got there the same way they got there?
No, they've known. People have asked, and I've obviously just said, "Look, I didn't go uni. This is how I did it." Some have been very proud. Some have been surprised. So yeah, everyone's known.
Has anyone ever been a bit jealous or resentful in the way of, oh, I did this, I got a degree, and I got this, and it's almost like how, or like, why do you deserve to be here when you don't have the same qualification, even though you're capable of doing the work, but they're a bit maybe up themselves or a bit resentful that maybe they've gone into debt to do all this. That's another thing you haven't gone into, because obviously I have a degree. I went into 30 grand, £30,000 worth of debt to get my degree. If you're doing a degree now, and it was cheaper back then, it was like 3,380 or something pound a year just for student fees. Then you had other loans that you could get like for accommodation, etc., etc. So all in all, with interest, you end up being about £30,000. Now the equivalent is probably nearer 50, maybe 60 grand, but probably about 50 grand. I don't know if you're a doctor, if you max out all the loans that you can get via the universities, it comes to roughly about £100,000 in the UK of debt that you'll have as soon as you graduate. So, because you don't have all that, have you had any resentment or jealousy or any negative sort of feelings towards you from anyone?
Um, I would say my first job I had a very hard time. Obviously, I wouldn't go into personal details, but I did. I worked with someone who was much older than me, and I was beneath him. Obviously, it was my first job, and the treatment he did towards me was very as though, why is she here?
Okay.
I went through uni, I went through all these hurdles,
Yeah.
and she's just stepped in because she studied an exam and she passed an exam and she's here. The rest of the team members were amazing. He, looking back, he was harsh to me, but he was also harsh to others. So I think that was just his personality.
Okay.
But that was very tough for me because I was only 19 years old, and being the only female, I've always been the only female for 5 years, but I think that was my first job, and I think it hit me quite hard as to, at 19 years old, you're not that mature, you're not as mature, but you're not as,
Confident in yourself,
yeah,
well
you're
grounded.
not confident, and the way that the confidence in me now is way different than to what I was there. So I think that was the only person that I would think back into my work experience to be like, yeah, maybe he was resentful towards me, but looking back at my other places, I think people were just surprised and just happy for me because
Okay.
they worked with me, they knew my potential, they knew I was good at what I did, and I think they were just proud of me. I've had people come to me and say, oh wow, you're so lucky got your foot in such a way, whereas I had to work at the service desk level for 5 years, and now I'm finally in this position that you have been in all along, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone has ever been resentful except for the first job I had.
Okay. So overall, everyone has been positive in different forms.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's obviously good. So obviously, I'm very proud of what you've done because I know people. Obviously, I won't go into the amount of money you make, but obviously, I know how much you make. I know other people that have done some sort of engineering degree and are on the same amount of money or maybe even less. And like I said, they've done a degree, they've gone into 30, maybe even more £1,000 worth of debt. So for you to do that, not to have the debt and to have the qualifications, then that's obviously very very impressive. Okay, so in regards to working in a technology field, have you ever had anyone, do you think, that looks down on you because you're a female? 'Cause obviously in jobs in general, there's an element to that. It's getting better, I'll say, in society, but there's still an element to that. But especially in technology, do you have that, or have you ever had that? Just because you think it's purely because you're a female?
Yes. So in my first job, especially, I always just refer back to that specific person and that job because of the way he treated me was not. I fully believe if I was a male and I was in that position, I wouldn't have been treated the way I was. Um, I was just, that was my first ever job. I was still learning on that job. I still needed to build my confidence. I still needed to build my skills in the real world. You sit at home and you study and you practice on your labs, but when something goes down in a business, it's more stressful than just when you're sat at home on your laptop and a connection in the router doesn't work. That doesn't really matter because you have all the time in the world to fix that at your own pace. But when you're in at a job and something goes wrong, the CEO's told about it and it's pressure, and it's just like, okay, who's responsible? Who's in the network team? And there was many instances where he'd just leave me, like let's say in the data center, he'd just leave me and just be like, oh, I'm literally one instance was went into the data center to do some cabling work, and he was like, oh hey, I'm just gonna go out for a smoke, I'll be back. And I was new at the job, I didn't have a pass in the data center to come in and out, it was through him, and 15 minutes go by and he doesn't come back. So I am sat there, like waiting, not sat there, standing there waiting and data center, you'd have signals on your phone. And then I had to literally go to the front of the data center and ring the receptionist and be like, hey, can someone come get me out? And I still remember the pure frustration that I had walking back to my desk and just seeing him sat there, just casually working as if nothing had happened. And I remember the last point of when I, decided to move away from that company was, there was a massive issue going on. He was on a conference call. He didn't invite me to the conference call, and I still believe if I was a male, that would have been different.
Yeah.
And I still remember, messaging him saying, hey, I've been on the firewall. I think this is the issue. Why don't you take a look? Him reading that message, making a huff and a puff. And I think somehow he knew that, she's only 19. If I make these kind of huffing, puffing noises like I'm pissed off, it'll upset her. It'll, shatter her confidence, which it did. And I fully believe, like, I'm see-through in that sense where people can see, that's affecting her emotionally. And I remember him just huffing and puffing and me just feeling so weak and so crap about myself that I literally got off the table, went outside. His manager was lovely to me, and he was away to another office on a meeting. And I remember just calling him and saying, I'm so sorry for calling you right now, but I really need to quit this job because this person is treating me in a way that I've just had enough. And I was there for about 2 years, so I was sticking it out the best, and I was actually in tears. And my manager obviously noticed that she's not here, where is she? And at this point in time, I was actually full-blown tears, walking around thinking, do I just go home? What do I do? Do I go pack my bags? And I literally remember him stopping me. He came running down to find where I was. He saw me, and I was literally in tears. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to put my notice in. The way he's treating me is literally crap. And he was like, okay, let's, take a breath. I'll sort it out. And I went upstairs, and he was like, the guy who was treating me like crap was like, what's wrong? And I just literally told him to shut up. Like, there in front of the whole office, I was like, you need to just shut up. I was like, you know exactly what you're doing to me. I've had enough. I'm going home. And the thing is that when you're obviously a female and you're obviously that young, it literally shatters your confidence. And I remember both my manager and his line manager, they were lovely to me, like I said, and they just literally told me, pack your bags, go home, relax, don't come in for a few days, take your time. Like, honestly, the managers I've had, except for like my job after that manager was crap as well, but it's been a lovely experience, but it's been tough.
Yeah.
And every job I've had after that, it's just been male predominantly, like just male driven. And I have had a sense where on conference calls when either you're talking to customers and they think you don't know what you're talking about because you're a female, and they look down upon you, and then they question, your knowledge or your opinion. But then
have they ever just assume maybe, like, if you're on a conference call with a customer or a client, that because you're a female, maybe you're just the assistant, or maybe you're just some sort of more junior than you are, and they're like, give me to your manager or whatever, even though you're the person who's meant to be handling it. Has that ever happened?
No, I've never had someone say, we want to speak to your manager, we want to speak to a senior above you. I've never had that, but okay. I have had, the kind of, you can feel it in someone's voice where they kind of don't believe what you're saying, and then I've had to back my opinion or my knowledge up very technically for them to be like, okay, she does know what she's talking about. So I've had those instances.
Okay. So you're talking about the fact that you're a female in a technology role. I remember you were saying, I don't know if you were saying about this company or the previous one or just in general, that the fact that you're virtually the only female on the teams that you've been working on, and all the females that you've seen there have always been working at, let's say, at the reception desk as, a receptionist. How has that interaction been? I'll say less with the male colleagues. I know we'll talk about that as well, but how about with the female colleagues? So the receptionists, and I'm guessing you probably had female cleaners on those buildings because they're big companies that you work at. You probably had cleaners that would have been female as well, receptionists that have been female. Obviously, if there's been kitchens, on-site kitchens, there's probably been females there as well. Like, how's that interaction been, if any interaction at all, as a result of that?
Yeah, it was the current job that I'm at, my manager, lovely guy again,
Yeah, you've told me how nice he is. He sounds like a manager you would actually want to work for.
Yes.
Most managers sound like you don't want to work for them, but he actually sounds very nice.
It's definitely very nice. So when I actually went for my interview, he was showing me around the office, and I remember he took me down to the call center, and he was like, "I just have one question to ask you," and I was like, "Sure," and he was like, "I've never seen an Asian female come into this kind of role." And he was like, normally you see females at a reception desk or, in the accounting department. Or
or even law
and he was
department
like,
or something.
how are you, like, why? And obviously I just told him my backstory, and he was very impressed. And, like, I've never had any bad interactions with women. But yes, all I've seen is women in, accounting departments or receptionists or, a cleaner. Like, there is a cleaner at the current place that I work, and she is on that floor. Obviously, I haven't seen her, since the pandemic hit. But she was lovely, and I still remember like going home to my mom one day and just saying, "I think you know how sensitive I am."
I know.
And I just remember thinking, I know where I started. Like, let me just one day, just because she was lovely to me. She always used to say hi to me and just like, say bye, because she used to come in just before I was leaving at 5.
Yeah.
And I remember going home to her mom and just being like, would it be weird if I just approach her one day and be like, hey, this is how I started in this field. Do you want something more?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
No. And I think that would be good, because you get a lot of people that would be like, okay, I've got this, I've made this, and let's say I have a role that's significantly better than, let's say, the cleaner role or the receptionist role, and just looking down on them on some level in your mind or their mind, thinking they're a inferior human being and I'm a superior human being, instead of thinking maybe they want more, they might just turn around and say, no thanks. I don't actually want any more. I just don't want that effort. They may turn around and say, that would be great, what's involved? Then they hear it, then they're like, no. Or they might turn around and say, what's involved? They hear it, and they execute on it. So it's always worth a try. Did you ever do that?
No, because
because I would love to hear about their reaction, because some people might go really defensive and be like, well, I'm happy with my job, or there's nothing wrong with it. It's really doubling down on what they're doing.
No, I never got to try it because obviously the pandemic hit. I had only been at this company for a short amount of time before the pandemic hit. So I never got a chance, but obviously if I ever see her again, I'll approach her, because she does seem like a very lovely girl, so I'm sure she won't mind.
Was she not old then? Because you get a lot.
No, she was Asian like me, and she was quite
young then.
She wasn't younger than me, but I think she was probably like, I'm 26, she might be 28 or 29.
But she wasn't old though, because I've seen cleaners where they've been 40, 50, and obviously saying to them, that's a total. Obviously,
because she was young, so I thought.
Obviously, if she studied for 2-3 years, she could do that. And obviously, that would put her in a better position if she made that sacrifice for those 2-3 years. Okay, then. So you've never had any interaction with, let's say, a receptionist where they've been a bit jealous or a bit snarky with you, that you can recall, because you're in a higher position and they're in a low position, and it's always been like there's guys in the higher position, you're in that position with the guys now, and you're going with meetings with them.
I will say though, however, being at this current place, or actually no, even in my first job, like, even though I wasn't a senior and I was a junior, like starting off in my first job, I'm just gonna bring in culture. I think it's just an Asian cultural thing where even in this job, obviously because now I'm a senior, and obviously it's on my email, obviously it's on my LinkedIn. When I first went down to the call center after starting this position, my first day or my second day, whenever issues arose, there were like, Asian females at the call center, picking up phones, and there was one specific girl that someone had an issue who sat next to her, and I remember going over to the guy's desk to take a look, and I just remember her asking, "Oh, are you new at the call center?"
I remember you
But she knew I was logging onto the PC, and I said, "No, I'm a senior telephony engineer here." And her face was just kind of like,
how is that possible?
Yeah, like what do you mean? She's an Asian girl, and like, And because my mom went to the interview with me and told, and my manager,
not inside,
not inside in the car.
She
And
walked you in.
I've always taken my mom with me to my interviews, just as like a little comfort thing. I remember my manager like jokingly laughing after all, like it's a good look sign that you brought your mom with me. And I think obviously at that time he was like, I'm gonna hire her, so he kind of gave me that hint. I remember even after the interview, my mom being like to me, "Oh, I've seen people, come in and out, and no one's dressing like you. Like no one dressed like me." And I remember when Ash took me down, I got a few stares from the males who were Asian because I was like in. It's not tight clothes, but even if they are tight, it's just like the office attire where it's like a skirt and like tights and like a
it's professional Western business.
Yes,
clothes.
whereas the women, Pakistani women, were just like in leggings and like long tops and dresses.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel like there's probably judgmental in that space where it's like, one, she's a female in that position, and two, she's dressing like that. I think it's just a cultural thing to just look down on people and just be judgmental, whether they're successful or whether it's the way they're dressed.
Yeah, there is, and
because I've never had that kind of thing from a person who's not Asian.
Yeah, it's very jealous oriented, I find, in non-white cultures, especially our type of South Asian. Like they can get very jealous when, especially, obviously I didn't meet those girls, but like especially when you get those types of girls or boys, or men and women now, that at school were probably a bit cool, or they thought they had it all, and now they're just ending up as a receptionist or a cleaner or whatever it is, and they're not that shit hot anymore. So like obviously you knew those women. Did they have that sort of vibe where at school they were that sort of like cool girl gang? They probably had that sort of little group, at school, high school.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you had your non-Asian popular groups and you had your Asian groups.
Yeah.
But I was never the type of girl who hung out with Asians. I never have. I've never liked the atmosphere. I've never liked just the way it is. I've always had non-Asian friends. As in white. I don't know if I can just say that.
Yeah, so.
So I've always steered away from Asian groups and Pakistani groups because I've just not liked the atmosphere they bring. So yeah, I mean they did walk around like they owned the place and.
Well, at school though, you mean?
At school and even in college and just like with the boys and stuff, and I was just never into that. So I've always steered away, and even at work, it's the same. When I personally, I don't know about anyone else, but when I go into the call center, it's still the Asians still have the same vibes. It's very childish. The girls are all over the boys, and the boys are all over the girls. Laughing, and it's just like, sometimes I've not looked down on them, but I have thought that, it seems like you guys are still stuck in your college phase, whereas you're probably like 28 or 29 now, and it's not embarrassing, and it's. But maybe
embarrassing for them.
Yeah, and it's just like I hope I'd wish people would just be a bit more serious about life sometimes.
Yeah,
that is their personal thing, but sometimes I have thought like perhaps like if you. Because you hear so many people in those call centers where they become managers and they go higher than that. I'm not saying everyone has to do that. I'm not saying if you're happy to pick up phones and take calls and have like a relaxed kind of job like that, even that would have some struggle to it. I'm not saying that job's easy or demeaning it anyway, but I'm just saying sometimes I look at those particular Asian people and I'm just like, if you just tried a bit harder, you might be somewhere else. Rather than looking at someone and being jealous, you could also be in that position.
Yeah, but the thing is, even though they're in the lower position, they still look down or talk to you in a way as if they're superior. But so because I've come across men and women that I went to school with, and I've seen them. Let's say if I go to a shopping center and they're just working behind the till at, I don't know, Primark or Deb, just a retail store like that, and they still have that sort of bit of arrogance vibe to them, and it's like you're like in your late 20s working in a retail store. It's like if you're 18 and trying to earn a bit of pocket money, that's different. But you're not really gonna, most likely, statistically speaking, you're not gonna get much beyond this. You're probably gonna be jumping from job to job with no career progression. Where obviously, the thing I'm always banging on about, not saving money, not investing in assets, not actually building a life for yourself. But they still have that element of arrogance to them. Because I remember probably about a year or so ago, I went to get my car clean. Get clean roughly once a year for everyone that knows. But yeah, and I was just waiting there because I was having it cleaned inside and outside. So obviously, when they're doing the inside, I have to get out for that. And I was standing to the side. The car, I think, just behind me, that just had the outside done, and he just got out to get the inside done. He got out, and I recognized him from someone from school. He was a couple of years younger than me, but he had a brother that was in my year, so I knew him, and I knew his brother, back then. And he had just rocked up in an Audi, I think, R8. So it was a nice car. It was a nice car, and you could tell he was wearing nice clothes. Like a nice. I don't like tight fitting clothes, but those tight fitting shirts, and because he was summer as well, so he had what looked like a nice pair of sunglasses on. And he was just walking up to me because obviously he recognized me and I recognized him, and I was just there in I think some sandals or some broken down trainers and like a tracky bottom. He's just coming up, and like he kept, because obviously there was a reason man distance, so he didn't say anything until he got nearer, and he just kept looking back at the car and just looking at me, just like as if to say, you like my car, you like my car, you like my car. But the funny thing was, I had just ran into his brother a few weeks prior to that, 2-3 weeks, and I just had a little catch up with him. I think it was in a supermarket, and he told me, I was asking him how's the family, because obviously I knew him and some of his other family. He told me about his situation, that he was, I think, he had just got some sort of programming degree. He was, I think, a junior programmer, and he was living at home, and he was literally every penny that he was getting, he was just spending it on debt to get stuff like a car and clothes. So he was walking up, with that fancy stuff. Like that's the way he would have acted at school. With his parents would have bought. And I was thinking, I know your situation. It's like, I know that you can't really afford it. So that was the funny thing. So it's like, even when they do have, let's say, a nicer job and maybe have slightly nicer things, they're still not in a superior position, but they still like have this element to them was like, oh, if I show to the world that I am, and everyone thinks that I can still look down on people. I just found it funny. I remember just like, so some people would get pissed off or disheartened by, like, I don't have that. I was like, I just feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
Because obviously you could tell he really wasn't happy. He put a smile on, but it was all fake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. Okay, so also I remember you were saying, I don't think that this job, your previous job, you used to install server racks in a server cabinet, and anyone that's tried to pick up a server rack, or let's say a big computer, they're pretty heavy. My wife's not the biggest of people. What, you're 5'4", 5'3.5", roughly, 5'3.5", and you don't weigh a lot. You're about 50 or so kilos, and trying to pick up one of those server racks. I don't know how. Do you know how much they weigh?
It wasn't server racks for that.
Oh,
it was switches and routers.
Oh, switches and routers.
And installing them into the
server racks.
Into the racks. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so the switches and the routers, and like, tell me about that and what you told me, like how heavy they were, and you doing that on your own, and they're like bigger guys there.
Yeah, so that was at my first job. So that was very, hands on. So I was, making cables and, RJ45 cables and, making long ones, making short ones, tidying up the cables in the server room. And, part of that hands on was, installing switches and routers. So, they were heavy, and yeah, just there were some guys who were like, lovely then, they were in the server team and they would help me occasionally, but sometimes, they were busy with their own job. And as we all know, like I mentioned before, the guy above me wasn't very nice. So, I would, steer away from asking him to help me. And, they used to be heavy, and I actually think I gained a bit of muscle from like lifting those. But, in my second job after that, I had a project where I needed to install some Cisco switches in an office in London. And I remember waking up at 6 a.m. driving down to London, which took about 6 hours, um, taking this massive Cisco box full of two switches, catalyst switches, in this big box in my boot, carrying it myself, like literally waddling
I can
through the
imagine.
street to
Like a
the
penguin.
office, literally like a penguin, putting it down, ringing, the office, being like, "Hi, I'm from this place. This is my name. I'm here to install some switches." Taking this box upstairs of my own. Unscrewing the switch that was there, disconnecting everything. Connecting my console cable from the switch to my laptop, making everything done, and then like screwing the switches back in, testing everything, and then reporting back to everyone, reporting back to the project manager saying this is up, this is up. So it's a very hands-on job, but it was just like, it's very, I feel like if you're not a boy, people, if you're not a male, not a boy, a man, people are just like, oh, she won't be able to do it, and then like, you're sat there because I remember at my first job, like, I don't have that much strength, as my husband said, but there used to be these, tiles on the floor, and there used to be this clamper that you'd have to clamp onto the tile and lift the tile up. So I'd get the clamping down to the tile.
You mean like a suction clamp?
Yes, those.
I know.
I could get the clamp done, but I couldn't. I didn't
pick the tile up.
I didn't have enough energy to pick the tile up. So when it came to picking the tile up, I'd have to run upstairs and get one of the guys to do it. So it was little things like that, like I'd have to pick the tiles up and then route the cables through and like run to the other side and like pull it through and like so it was things like that. So yeah, that I have to do.
So when you were doing that, like bringing in those switches and those routers, you must have obviously, I don't know, like, did you go through reception? What I'm asking is, did you go past other women that weren't in that sort of role, like receptionists or whatnot? And if you did, what sort of looks did you get from them, or what sort of interaction did you get from them? That dynamic I'm interested in.
I mean,
was it like a back entrance thing, like the servers? Like
no,
there?
no. I mean, for the server room, I had to go, in front of everyone downstairs. But like I had to go to the where people were sat, in finance. Basically, there were a lot of, literally, I think it was literally all women and 2 men in the finance team at my first job. And I remember having to go do, like, we were installing some like new switches and new cables. I remember having to, go and be like, "Excuse me, I just need to go under your desk for a moment."
Yeah.
To like get out the cable and and being 19 and being a woman and doing that, I actually used to be quite self-conscious and embarrassed because I used to be like, oh, they must think, yo, what is she doing? Like going under our tables and getting cables and routing cables.
Yeah.
So I used to be so embarrassed, and I used to like tell the guys, like, can you not do it? And I'll do something else. And obviously the boys never used to care because they used to be like, that's our job. But as I've gotten older, I'm kind of more proud of it because I think I can do something they can't do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, those women sat there, like, even if they thought, even if they looked down on my job, they wouldn't be able to make that cable. They wouldn't be able to route it across because, they just don't know the dynamics of how it works.
Yeah, that is complex stuff. We need to get back to making some, RJ45 cables. Let us know in the comments and the reviews if you would like my wife on video to make a RJ45 cable. I do want it to make one, and I'll make one of those. Her ones do look a little tighter than mine. Mine ended up having a lot of bare wire, and I duct tape it closed for insulation.
That's not good.
They work though. They do work. Still rocking it. Okay, yeah. So that's the guest introduction done. It's a little longer than I was expecting, but that's good. That is. So we're just gonna have a few different random talking points now, and the first thing I want to talk about is the economy. What do you think about the economy, as a whole, and is there anything specific you want to talk about before I ask you questions about the economy?
I don't have anything specific. I just think, what we're seeing right now is like, just saw a headline yesterday saying the rich are just getting more richer.
Yeah.
I just, me just being me as a person, I've just always thought, the life's kind of, not the life, the world is unfair in that sense, where, there's so many homeless people in the world where, people who are at the top.
Yeah,
they could easily take that away.
No, I think there's obviously that problem, but that's nothing new. Rich getting richer and poor getting poorer. Like that gap, getting wider in many ways. But also, generally speaking, if you look, the standard of living and the lives of people on average throughout this world have got better. Like it's significantly better than it was 100 years ago. Just look at it from disease perspective and expected life, life expectancy, and let's say 200 years ago, 300 years ago. So there's definitely things that are getting better, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. I agree that there's definitely a lot of wealth out there, especially in the upper 1% of the 1%, and 1% in general, but especially the one of the 1%. And if that was redistributed a little better instead of being put into a lot of consumerism and certain elements of capitalism and greed, then we could fix a lot of the world's issues. But I think that the other thing I don't like is when you get the news, and because they're all about sensational media, and they write articles like, I'm sure you've read those articles that like the top 1% have their net worth have jumped $1 trillion since the start of Corona or something. I'm sure you've seen those articles, and those articles, like, they don't outright say it because it's not true, but they somewhat hint that they're what's it called profiting off of all this mess. Some people are. There's that, but so they make it sound in like a sort of a malicious way, because obviously if you before Corona hit put in, let's say, £10,000 into Netflix stock, now that £10,000 will be worth a hell of a lot more, just because Netflix stock has gone up. Nobody would have said to you or I, oh, you're a bad person as a result of that. They probably were like, that's pretty cool, most likely. But if, let's say, the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings, or let's say other big investor in Netflix, happens to have a lot of stock in Netflix, and the stock price goes up, the narrative changes to, oh, they've profited off Corona. Obviously, their stock price has gone up because more people are at home. More people are at home, meaning they're using more products and services that are typically used at home. But that doesn't necessarily mean they've done anything bad, if you know what I mean. Yes, obviously there will have been some people, especially investors and bankers, that would have moved money around and manipulated the market in a way that has negatively affected people. But when they just put a blanket statement out there like these people, their net worth has jumped since the start of the pandemic, hinting that they've done something wrong. It's like they may literally have done zero, but they just happen to have shares in a company. Maybe they created, or maybe they just have a big holding in a company where the price has gone up, which is obviously fine. Because on the flip side, nobody turns around and says, okay, let's say this billionaire that was worth 10 billion, and I don't know if this is the case, but I'm sure there is probably a billionaire that's worth 10 billion. He's only worth, let's say, 5 now because the shares they had prior to the Corona hitting aren't as valuable anymore. Maybe they were more shares linked to stuff like being in an office, for example.
Yeah.
So like there's always the flip side. But yeah, I definitely agree there's problems out there. Obviously we've been discussing it, and we watched that movie Margin Call, the 07-08 financial crisis. Everything that you know about that, how do you feel about what you have read and what you've heard about all of that in terms of the greed and just that in general, what happened?
Well, what do you mean in terms of greed?
Obviously, okay, so with the 0708, just a little recap for everyone. 0708 financial crisis, it was the housing crisis, the housing bubble, where the banks weren't really doing many checks. They were just giving virtually anyone a mortgage to get property because the prices were just skyrocketing year after year, year after year, and it was just considered a safe bet. They was doing no money down mortgages, which is effectively no deposit was required, but they would give you a mortgage for hundreds of thousands of pounds of dollars. Especially in America, it was really bad, maybe even millions of dollars in some case. And they was doing stuff like CDOs, which is collateralized debt obligations, and what's it called, MBSs, mortgage-backed securities, where they will package in really bad mortgages that had less chance of being paid off with some say good ones and then packaging them as really high quality securities and selling them, and that made the economy crash. But just that whole, what I'm asking you is like, what's your opinion and of all that greed that was going on and just spend and just not managing your money, and then obviously on the banking side as well, all of the money that was pumped into people through mortgages and debt, and also the fact that a lot of people lost their jobs or they lost a lot of money. Some people even took their lives as a result of it, and virtually no banker went to jail. I think maybe one low level banker went to jail. I think it was one or two, but like no major banker went to jail, and they got like all their fat bonuses as well, all of that. Like,
Yeah. I mean, we've just seen it now, like not on a high scale, but like the housing now. It's
yeah,
like the deposits were what was it, the 5%?
yeah, they've gone because obviously at the start of Corona, they were. I know pre-Corona, so March 2020, pre that, you could get away. Let's say if you were a second-time buyer, you could get away with let's say a 10% deposit. 15 to 20% was always that nice golden mark where you would have a lot more mortgage, packages available to you. But when Corona hit, 15% was pretty much the minimum. Like 10% ones were like you may get one or two packages with not very favorable interest rates. 5% ones were gone, but they brought back 10%, and even 5% ones, they usually have some sort of government scheme backed by them. Like a lot of time, the government will probably prop up the mortgage and give a bit. Let's say the bank may end up getting 15%, but you're going to bed with the government, and at the end of the day, the low percent will never do benefit you long term. Anyway, but yeah, you got the 5% mortgages now, so you can get it with lower money. So like, what was you gonna say
I was
regarding
just
that?
gonna say that we saw how quick the houses went this time
Oh
in the
yeah,
pandemic. Like you'd search for a house, and then literally 2 days later, you'd be like it's no longer on the market. And I personally feel like there's less properties going on the market. I just feel like the property, what do you call it? Property, not department, the property
market.
just can't keep up. That's what I personally feel like what's going on. It just can't keep up. Like people are just snapping up houses like that, and
Yeah.
I just feel like
Why do you think that? Why do you think people, even though some people have lost their jobs, some people are on furlough, and realistically, even if they don't know it, a lot more people are going to lose their jobs. All this furlough and quantitative easing, which is basically the government printing off money, cannot last, and it will collapse at some point. They can keep propping it up, and some people think that because they got some fancy new, economic, technology or ways of doing business, that they can make sure we don't crash this time. But it's gonna crash again, but people are still going out and buying the properties. What do you think there's still that demand for the property? I've got my opinion. I'll give you that in a second. But like, what do you think?
one, I think there's greed. I think
Okay.
people who have money to spare
Yeah.
are just thinking, okay, let me take advantage of that situation. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying, perhaps we might also one day be in that situation where we want to grab a property because we have the means to do so, which is fine. But I think there's some people out there who abuse it. I'm like, okay, deposits are down. It's a global pandemic. Let me just go get 3, 4 properties because I can.
Yeah.
And then some people, I just think, we've talked about this before, where people are just like, I need to change.
Yeah.
But me, I think I kind of come to the same thinking as you. Is both me and you would be quite content. I've seen the way we are when it comes to real estate. I think if we find that perfect property, I don't think we'd go anywhere for a good 15 to 20 years. I think once we outgrow that in terms of family, then we'd be like, okay, we're nearing to outgrowing this. We now need to look for something that's a bit bigger and a bit spacious. But I don't think, if we were to have one child and we'd have a 5-bed house, I would think after 3 years, or we're a bit bored of it, let's just move.
Yeah. And even if you don't go to a bigger one, you'll just be, oh, I need a change, or it might be a bit more expensive in a slightly better neighborhood. So like, there's always that element with a lot of people, and we know people that have done that, where it's like they were in a house that was fine for them, and they didn't, unless they have kids, but they just move into a bigger house, and as a result more expensive, like twice as much, instead of going the opposite route and thinking, okay, I've got extra money, I'll save the extra money, pay down my mortgage, get that paid off in, let's say, 10 years with, me and my partner, if for some people, and then afterwards you have that freedom of saying, okay, I've got this extra money now, I can comfortably go and get a house instead of stretching like a bigger one. I can maybe invest in property or other assets, maybe stocks and bonds, and make more money that way. Or let's say I've got the room to extend it, I'll just extend this house. I can easily do that. Yeah. So instead of being sensible about it, most people want it now, but want to pay for it later. Instead of doing the opposite way of saving now, and then maybe getting it a little bit later, but getting it comfortably, even getting something better, and instead of getting it in the heat of the moment, thinking, okay, I want this, and what does that entail, and do I actually want it? And then you realize, okay, maybe I didn't want, this big house. I wanted a slightly nicer house, but I wanted it nearer these things that are important to me. I wanted to be nearer these things, or where there's people or places, and then doing that instead of just moving from one place to the next place to the next place. So yeah, I was gonna give my opinion on why I think people are snapping up the properties. Partly it's because the property market was tied like an elastic band, where Corona hits, people couldn't really buy property. So as a result, there was a lot of pent up demand. When the floodgates opened, the people that were really, really ready to buy, they all just flooded through, and then a lot of properties started getting bought out. So I think there was a huge element of that. Other thing is, because the stamp duty, they had the stamp duty relief, so there was a lot of money to be saved on stamp duty. So people were thinking, okay, if I can get a second home or a new house, and even if they couldn't, they was trying to stretch to it just because they was going to save some money on stamp duty. My opinion on the stamp duty stuff is, yes, it's not ideal that you have to pay a tax on buying a property, but if the stamp duty is really that much that significant to your financial situation, where you're deciding whether or not you should go for a property or not, you're getting a property that's too much. But like, that's my opinion on it. It's like, you don't go to the store and buy something and look at the price before VAT and think, okay, I can just about afford it with VAT. You just buy it at the price it is.
Yeah.
It should be the same with house. Like, if it's £100,000 house, and let's say with the stamp duty it's 105,000, you're buying £105,000 house. Don't see it as £100,000. In reality, it's probably 110 because you got legal fees and other fees. So £100,000 house is actually £110,000 house. Like, just see those other things as part of the house purchase, like flat out. That's what you actually need to afford to be able to buy it. So I think there's an element of that, this stamp duty as well. Also, I think a bunch of investors, obviously you were saying people taking advantage of it. I don't see anything wrong with it, because if I was in that situation, let's say in a few years, let's say I had a bunch of cash saved and something negative happened like this, and as a result the prices, let's say I was able to get a bargain in the property market or something else, I would definitely do it. I would get say a few houses or a few flats or maybe a few apartment buildings, and then say rent that out or renovate it and sell it off and make a profit. Because it's like that saying that John D. Rockefeller had, who at one point was worth about $400 or so billion in today's money, who was the richest self-made billionaire of all time. He said, when blood is running through the street, that's the time to buy. And when your shoe shine boy is giving you advice, that's the time to sell. But when people are scared, that's the time to buy. When people are hopeful and they are like going into the market, like buying a lot of property, that's the time to be selling. Because that's, generally speaking, when things are at a bargain, when people are scared. Because obviously if people are scared and they're desperate, they'll sell it for a low price. But if there's a lot of demand for it, then the price is going to be inflated, and as a result, that's probably the time to sell, and then wait till when it goes, down a bit as a result of that. So I've always loved that quote that when people are scared, that's when you buy. When people are hopeful, that's when you sell. Also heard it like in a different way when you start seeing a lot of TV. That's always if we're talking about property. We start seeing a lot of house renovation shows, a lot of TV shows about buying property and whatnot. That's and like everything you're hearing, you're seeing billboards, you're seeing on magazines, on radio if you listen to radio. If that's all you're seeing, then it's probably a good time to sell because it's getting oversaturated. But if you're not seeing that and people just do not want to discuss it, then that's probably a good time to buy. Obviously, you've got to stick in there and not listen to the noise and listen to what other people will say because they're going to have the mainstream media in their ear and they're going to be feeding that to you because that's what they believe. But I think there's an element of all of that. Okay, so we've had a little discussion about the economy and we've discussed corona as well. So let's discuss a bit of cryptocurrency. So what's your opinion on cryptocurrency and what do you know about cryptocurrency?
I don't really have an opinion on it. I don't really know. I knew of Bitcoin because everyone talked about it, but I never took time out to.
Who talked about it? Were the people at work?
People at work.
Okay.
People at work.
Anyone in your family ever know or talk about it?
No.
Work only? Because they was in the technical field.
Yes, work only. I never took time out to expand my personal knowledge on it or look further into it. Obviously, after meeting you now, you're very into cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and just assets and investing and just knowing more about what's out there.
Yeah.
Even if I'm not involved in it, just knowing more about what's out there, I think that can only put you in a better position.
Yeah, so only after that, after being married to you, that my knowledge is expanded.
Okay, so what if you was to obviously try your best? If you was to describe what cryptocurrency is, you can use examples. How would you describe it?
I don't know how to describe it. It's not freedom of money because it's still money. You have to put money into it, but I feel like.
Okay, if somebody said describe Bitcoin, I think that might be an easier question. Is that an easier question?
No, because it kind of ties into it all.
Okay. Do you want to give my explanation of it?
It would be better since
Okay, so I'll give you the generic explanation that you can get off like a bunch of people on YouTube and the generic Google explanation that cryptocurrency is a decentralized currency based on a decentralized system, which in Bitcoin's case is something called blockchain. And blockchain is basically it's a ledger. So basically you can think of it like a fancy database. And it's like a bunch of blocks that have transactional information in there, like you sent money to me, I've sent money to Bob, Bob sends money to Jane, blah, 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 blah. This is how much money is being sent. And that block can have X amount of data in there, transactional data in this case. Once that's filled, you have to have another block. Once another block's added to the blockchain, it's basically linked to the previous block, hence the blockchain. So that's like the sort of the general technical description. I still think that if you're not into it, you don't know that much about it, that doesn't mean much to you. So the other way of thinking about it is if you have general fiat money, like dollars, pounds, you generally store it in a bank.
Yeah.
And let's say you store it in HSBC Bank.
Yeah.
That's a single bank and you are beholden to their system. So if you've got money let's say all your money is in digital form, it's linked to some sort of card, let's say a debit card. If their systems went down, let's just say they went down for 48 hours, you can't spend that money. This heavily linked to a single entity, a single company. Whereas a cryptocurrency, which is decentralized, isn't linked to a single computer or a single organization's computers, even though they may be all around the world. It's on our network, which is linked by people that really have no relation or connection other than the fact that they use the currency itself. So you can think of it like if you was a kid and you was trading, Pokemon cards or some sort of collectible like that.
Yeah.
You're not beholden to some central bank telling you you can only use it this way, or if their systems go down you can't use it. You can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
So it's like a more extreme version of that on a global level. So the other, I think I'll say, benefit of cryptocurrency is that it doesn't matter what your government or your banks are saying about it, big or trying to do about it, because you can move it freely without them knowing. Technically,
Yes.
one of the benefits of that is, if let's say you're in a country that is war torn, let's say one of the third world countries like Iraq or Afghanistan, if people there had money prior to all of their stuff happening, over a decade ago, and some of them were pretty wealthy, let's say doctors, lawyers, they lost that money.
Yeah.
So you get people that were highly qualified there, had some nice life there, their city's been torn, let's say their apartment or their house is not livable anymore, they get out of the country, they come to UK, they come to America, they go Germany or wherever, and they got nothing there.
Yeah.
They can't transfer that currency because you'll be highly inflated as a result, and if they can even access their banks to transfer it. But with cryptocurrency, it doesn't really matter. As long as they've got it securely stored, they could literally go to another country and use Bitcoin for its current value with no connection to their old country.
Yeah.
So that's a huge advantage. And the fact that I could send you, let's say, $100,000 worth of Bitcoin right now if I wanted to, whereas there's restrictions on how much money you can send with a regular bank.
Yes.
Generally speaking, it's about £10,000 per day, if one person can send. Otherwise, they start asking, questions because they're, regulated by the government and they have to do it for money laundering and for, criminal activities. But with cryptocurrency, transfer as much as you want, as little as you want.
Yeah.
You can transfer like very small amounts, like part of a Bitcoin or part of a certain cryptocurrency, because there's thousands of cryptocurrencies out there, Bitcoin by far being the biggest. So it's just a way of interacting without having somebody tell you what you have to do. There's another great thing about cryptocurrencies, what's called forks, where you can get the original sort of system, fork it, like basically create a clone of it and modify it slightly. And you're essentially doing a bet that your system is better. If it is, and enough people flock to your new, let's say, Bitcoin. So if you have original Bitcoin, then you had Bitcoin Classical, that was one of the ones that got forked. If enough people took money out of Bitcoin and put it into Bitcoin Classic, that never happened, but it's still worth in the billions. But if they took it out of the original and put it into one of your forks, that would become the new de facto standard. Whereas you can't really do that with government without some sort of revolution.
There's only one standard.
Yeah, there's only one government, there's only one standard, and you don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
Whereas anyone can go and create a fork of a cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Whether or not anyone will invest in it is a different matter. But let's say if you created it good enough, you marketed it well enough, and enough people jumped on board, you could actually have maybe not one, maybe two. And let's say one was beneficial for small transactions, one was beneficial for large transactions. You could switch between the two.
Yeah.
Like another example I heard, I think it was, I can't remember the guy's name, and he was saying that, think of it like, you had the 2008 election. Was it 2000? Or I think it's 2012. Was it Mitt Romney within 2012 with Barack Obama? I think it was 2012. Mitt Romney and let's say Barack Obama. And instead of saying you either have Barack Obama or you have Mitt Romney, maybe half of America or part of America is, run by Mitt Romney, part of by Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And based on investments and where businesses are located, they can move those businesses, move that money to different states, to different parts of America. They can basically essentially vote which one is doing a better job.
Yeah.
Because obviously one may do a better job in the election, but that one doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do a better job when they're actually in office.
Yes.
So, and you're stuck with one person then, even though maybe both had their merits, but both also had their dance as well.
Yeah.
Maybe both of them there, like maybe Barack Obama was, let's say, better with some leftist policies, but maybe Mitt Romney had some good right-wing policies that, when married together with the left, could help the economy better.
Yeah.
So I think that's one way to look at cryptocurrency, what you can do and what you can't do in the current system. Okay, so let's get on to a topic that we both love, gaming. That's, as you know, one of the reasons I married you was you should have seen my wife's face there. But it's true, though. That's one of the reasons that I married you, because you loved gaming. Most other people, especially women, do not like gaming that much, or they're not willing to admit they do. There's an element of that. You're willing to admit that you did, and you like game because you had a PS4 Pro. We got married. Obviously, we got a PS4 now together, but
PS5.
Did you say PS4?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we got a PS4 as well. But yeah, PS5 and Xbox Series X. We play like the Nintendo Switch, Super Mario 3D World, or Mario Kart on a regular basis. We'll play 3D World in a bit as well. Wouldn't mind playing finishing World 5 of it.
Yeah.
Finishing that. So, what got you into gaming, and what are your favorite games?
What got me into gaming was, I'd say, my mum.
Yeah.
And my uncles, actually. Give them both credit. When I was little, my first console was the Sega Mega Drive.
Yeah.
And my first ever game was Sonic. So, ever since I was young, I think, thanks to my mum, she's been very open-minded in that sense, where I feel like, again, culturally, it's looked down upon on girls to game. And
definitely.
Yes, definitely. And it's been kind of, oh no, that's something boys only do. Whereas my mum's kind of been the opposite and has been, my daughters can, freely do something a boy would normally do.
Yeah.
So my mum's very strong-minded in that sense. So, that was my first console. And then my mum, shortly after, got me, the Game Boy Advance SP handheld console.
Which one did you have? The flip one or
the flip one?
The SP
in grey. Yeah, SP.
I had that one as well.
And then obviously when the Nintendo DS Lite came out, I really need that, mum, and then she got me that. And then obviously, I grew up, started working, and got the Xbox 360, which I still regret to this day. I wish I just got the
PS3.
Yes. PS3.
Didn't your mum
she
say,
said,
was you in game?
We were in game, and we were looking, and she was like, "Don't get the Xbox, you're gonna regret it. Get the PS. It's better." I was like, "Come on, mum, what do you know? I'm gonna get the Xbox." Went over the Xbox, literally hated it, and obviously you can't return it, so I was stuck with that. Didn't say anything to my mom because I knew she was gonna, get the triple R and be like,
yeah.
It was your choice.
Do you remember how much 360 was at the time you bought it?
300-400.
I'm guessing with some Game Boy.
Yes.
Yeah. Was it Slim that you had or original?
Slim, and I got the Connect.
Yeah.
So I got a bundle.
Yeah, because I've seen the Connect at your mum's house.
Literally used it like twice.
Yeah. What game did you? I'm guessing you must have Connect Sports.
No, we didn't get that. We got the animal one.
Connect-Im-All or Connect-Animals? Something like that.
And then we got like a Disney
I should
one.
have that on the shelf somewhere as well, though.
And then we got like a Disney one. Where you
Connect Sports was decent, I found.
No,
play sometimes.
I can play sometimes. Put used to yours.
Yeah, but honestly, after having VR,
oh yeah,
like the thing is, some of those motion games were pretty good, but then when you can whack on, we'll talk about that as well in a second. But when you can whack on a VR headset, have controls that are simulating your hand, it'd be good when we got haptic gloves. But when you can interact with the world, it's on enough. We need to play some VR sometime again. Okay. Our favorite games?
Me and Assassin's Creed, I think you know that.
I know you love Assassin's Creed.
That was literally why I bought my Xbox. I mean, I could have bought a PS, but why
Favorite AC?
Favorite AC? I think number 3.
Brotherhood? Which one, Brotherhood? Was that in between 2 and 3?
I think that was in between. Let me take a look. I wasn't know. She can't be a big Assassin's Creed fan. She doesn't know that.
AC3. Was that the
Black
one?
Flag was okay, but
yeah, number 4. That was the launch one for PS4. I remember having that.
Yeah, just number 3.
Number 3.
But it was Assassin's Creed number 2, Brotherhood,
Revelation, and then
number 3.
Let's click on that. Yeah, I remember that
Do you
one.
remember
The
this one?
tomahawk. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
I think this one was good. I just like the scenery and everything. I still need to finish it.
One and I remember finishing. The 1 and 2 were my favorite because I remember playing one. I had it.
That was Ezio, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I still remember. I still miss it too. I remember 1 and 2, especially 1, because I had a hacked Xbox 360. So obviously all my games were just legitimately from torrents.
Yeah.
And I remember playing that, whacking in, it working. There was always that thing, oh, is it gonna work? And it working and playing of. It was just. I remember the graphics being out of this world at the time, and the fact that how open world it was, that you literally could climb on you was literally climb on anything. Yeah, I think to the extreme because they were climbing stuff where it's like there really isn't anywhere to put your finger, but they were still doing it.
Yeah.
And at the time, and then number 2 was more refined. I remember me and my mate Steve, we were racing to platinum in it. I want to say he beat me to the platinum because it was Christmas.
Yeah.
We got it for Christmas, and we were just playing it literally on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And messaging each other. Yeah, Assassin's Creed. What other games do you like?
I mean, I played Batman Arkham.
Which one?
Is it Arkham Asylum?
That's the first one.
On Xbox 360.
Yeah.
So I played that. I like that. I think
that.
I like games like that.
Where they're open worldy.
I didn't get much fun about it.
Well, Arkham Asylum isn't very open. Arkham City is open because where it is.
Asylum.
Yeah, because you're out in the city, and there are Arkham Origins, and the third one, which was I say the best one, Arkham Knight. Those graphics look so good.
Yeah.
Got on the PS4. We can download it on PS5 sometime.
Yes, we play. I like games like that, but then again, I don't like Tomb Raider. It's good, but I personally don't like games that kind of shake me up like that because a Tomb Raider is sudden
death.
Sudden death.
And the spike literally just goes through your head.
It's like Last of Us. I've said so many times I couldn't play that because just don't.
I love that game.
Yeah. So I mean, games like that and just kind of chill games as well. I prefer as well.
Yeah.
So yeah. But Assassin's Creed, I think, would be my favorite.
Okay. Okay, go back to Assassin's Creed. I remember with the Ezio, what I liked about Ezio when I read my stories, that he chopped off his in the story, chopped off, I think it's these fingers, the one that Spider-Man does to activate the web from his hands. He chopped those 2 off, so that way he could have his hand like that, and the blade could, because otherwise the blade would go through his fingers. Yeah. So he manually took those fingers off himself, so the blade, whatever position his hand was in, the blade could always come out without hurting him. I thought that was a pretty cool little touch in the story. Yeah, I wouldn't mind Ezio coming back. Obviously, we've had a lot of different settings.
What do you think about Valhalla?
So bad. It's so bad. It is so bad. I borrowed it off my cousin, and I played that after, or started that after playing Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I do live gameplay.
Got to say that's a good game.
Yeah, we'll talk about that as well. I do live gameplay streams pretty much every day, and I did that for about a month and almost 2 months. Ghost of Tsushima, where Platinum did as well, and man, that game was good. The graphics,
so good.
The story, the gameplay, the controls, everything about it was on point, and the fact that was a PS4 game that has not had a proper PS5 upgrade yet. If I bought that as a PS5 launch title, I would have still been blown away. It was that good looking and that good in terms of the game mechanics. So that was very impressive. So having played that, then going to play Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I did one live stream for an hour, looked how long it would take to finish the single player. It was estimating 50 to 60 hours. Ghost of Tsushima was about 25 or so hours, 25 hours. And I did it in about 45 hours for the entire platinum, for 100% of the game, almost 100% to get the platinum. And I was like, I am not doing that because I had just done a lot of hours already in the game. I was like, I'm not doing that again. I was happy to do Ghost. It was such a good game. I really enjoyed it. It's one of those games where I was like, I don't want to put it down. And I'm not looking forward to the day where I've completed it. I'm not playing it anymore, really. Whereas with Assassin's Creed, I was like, I don't want to play it. It is that bad. Yeah. So yeah, I played one live stream. Hell no. I don't remember the old ACs, some of them being this bad. I think it's just this new one.
Odyssey was bad. I don't know.
I thought Odyssey was alright. Was that the one with
Really?
the Romans?
Yeah, I mean, I played Origins. I warmed up to the first time I played Origins, hated it, hated the control changes, moaned about it to everyone, and then gave a second chance to it just before our marriage, really.
Yeah.
And I found it good, so.
I remember in Origins when the guy kept saying Siva, Siva, Siva.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what did that mean again?
Siva was the.
Bird.
Was it a bird?
I don't know. I remember I thought people just kept saying Siva, Siva, Siva. That's all you were hearing as AC Origins.
Shit, let's see.
My wife's just Googling it.
I can't remember at this point.
I remember.
Oh, no, Siva.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that was the town, wasn't it?
Yeah, the people just kept saying Siva, Siva, Siva.
What was the bird called?
Dunno.
Oh, Benny bird. Oh, it's called Sanu.
Senu.
That's
Okay.
why it kind of Siva's.
Yeah, there's definitely similarities. Okay. So, let's talk about VR. You hadn't tried VR before we got married, had you?
No.
So now that you've tried it, you've tried the Oculus Quest 2, which in my opinion is the best well-rounded headset. I've had the Oculus Rift, I've had the Quest 1, I've got the Quest 1 still, I've got the Quest 2, I had the HTC Vive Pro, and I've got the Valve Index. Even though the Valve Index, quality-wise and fidelity, can't really be beaten, the Quest 2, all round, considering how good it is, they got Oculus Link. If you got a good enough router, I'm still waiting for that. I'm going to go on a rant. That Asus ROG, I think AXE 11000 router, still waiting for that to come out in the UK. Still is not out, so I want to get that Wi-Fi 6E router. But if you have a decent router, you can even play your PC VR games on the Oculus device wirelessly. And what I've read and seen online, it runs smoothly, even at a higher refresh rate. So that is good. But yeah, like I said, it's my favourite all-round headset. First time you played it, what did you think when you first put it on then? The Quest 2. Oh, the Quest. I mean, VR headset in general.
Crazy. That's what I thought.
Crazy?
Because it just felt surreal.
Yeah. For me, and I think for you, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but for pretty much everyone else that's tried it, it did actually feel like that crazy jump, you know, in gaming. Because I remember when I had the PS3 and coming from the PS2, that felt like a crazy jump.
Yeah.
You know, you had the networking features, the graphics obviously were a lot better, the gameplay, like the actual controller, the gameplay, all of that was a lot more powerful. The Blu-ray player, and it was obviously more of a media device than anything else. I mean, than the previous one it ever was. And did not get that feeling of that jump from 3 to 4 or even 4 to 5. I mean, we got PS5, it's good, it runs faster, but if you just if we're just playing the games, it does not feel like that crazy jump, obviously, because we had that intermediary, the PS4 Pro. But even without that, but whereas with VR, you put that on and you're like, I can look around, I can, with most of the headsets and games, I can move backwards and forwards, making sure you don't hit or trip over anything, and interact with the world, pick stuff up. Obviously, no smelling yet, no tasting, but that will come when, you know, headsets basically take over the synapses and take over, you know, it's going to happen. Like, what I'm imagining is like a really small star goggle that goes onto your eyes, that projects a laser into your eyes and basically takes over your senses. So I've just picked up a pen from the table now. I could do that in the game while sitting down in the real world, not moving in the real world, pick something up and it actually feels like I'm picking it up. I can squeeze it like I'm picking it up. I could even break it in there and you would feel like I've actually broken the pen, and I would feel the tension in my muscle and bones. There's obviously gonna be problems with that, you know, ethical concerns and other potential problems, but without a doubt, that's where we're going to. Some way of taking over our natural senses, but emulating them so we're not having to do it.
Yeah.
Because imagine if we could do rock climbing, because you played that game, The Climb. I played The Climb 2 as well. I need to do some more live streams of that. We played that. That feels very good. It feels very immersive. When you look down, if you're afraid of heights, it can definitely be a bit disorientating, especially the first few times. But imagine if it actually felt like you was there. I mean, you couldn't feel that you had a headset on. When you touched a rock, it actually felt like you was on there. You felt like you was hanging. Your heart rate was, beating. And if you let go, it actually felt like you let go. Like
Crazy.
that would be obviously that's sound like the plot from some sort of insane sci-fi movie where the people end up getting trapped there and they're feeling and they're constantly dying, for example. This is something like that. So yeah, VR. I'm looking forward to more VR content. I would like more VR content. There's a few other things I would like to download. There's something called. Let me have a look at it. It's like. Do you remember Mirror's Edge?
Mirror's Edge.
Yeah, don't know if you ever played the game. They had Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which was a newer one, but the old Mirror's Edge.
I remember it, but I've never played it.
You never played it? No. So there's a game. Well, Mirror's Edge is a free, like a free running parkour game, and you just have to navigate, let's say, a city or a world. There's a game called Stride on VR, which basically looks like Mirror's Edge, but in VR. And obviously I'm just special. This is literally what it looks like. But imagine that in VR.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah.
So parkour.
Yeah. Because that's what Mirror's Edge literally look like that. But you're obviously just with a controller on a TV or on a computer screen. Whereas with this, you literally are in the real world. I might buy this today. It's only early access at the moment. But I might, grab hold of it. Actually, I might do it. I'll do it after I've done the climb. My incentive to complete the climb.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we discussed a fair bit about gaming. We can obviously circle back to that topic. So we was only planning on doing this podcast for about an hour or so. It's definitely gone longer than that, and we still got more topics to discuss. So what we'll do, we'll wrap it up now. There's one other thing I just want to discuss with you because that's more recent news. But we'll just do another podcast. I say in a few weeks. I want to do these on a weekly basis, and they'll go live on Saturday. And I'll do another one with you, and we'll continue talking about the rest of the stuff, and we can recap some of this as well in the other podcasts. But obviously, we were just reading that Prince Philip has died.
Yes.
So I just want to ask about that. Your opinion? What's your opinion on that and the royals and all of that stuff?
You know me, I'm a sensitive person, so
I do.
When I just read the news, I was like, oh, I wonder how she's feeling, and I wonder how the whole family's feeling.
But you're like that in general, regardless of who they are.
Regardless of who it is, I always, death is very sensitive to me, so I'm always very sensitive in that matter. But the royals as a whole, I've never been I've never been obsessed with them. I've never been obsessed with them as we would be with celebrities or like with a singer or an actress, etc. I've never gone out to like one of those rallies and like wanting to meet them or shake their hand. I've never been like that.
Trying to touch them or something.
No, yeah, I've never been. To me, it's just they're the royals, but I've never given them much thought except for like in my opinion, they do sit there free and just go on these tours and just use
our tax money.
Yes, on our tax money. I mean, that's the only thing that kind of gets to me is because we get letters sent through on a yearly basis being like this is your tax, this is what your tax is being used on over the year, and you think back and you think, okay, I was working so hard on my 9 to 5 on my business or whatever, and this is what my tax is going towards, like.
Because imagine if you got your tax letter at the end of the year, and instead of it saying part of the money had gone to the royals, if it said all the money has been split between.
It doesn't say the royals though.
No, it doesn't.
It says library and army and like.
But it goes. Yeah. But let's just. This is obviously an oversimplification, but let's say it went to two things: education and medical care, and then he said based on the tax that you paid, the medical system was able to save 4 lives. Let's say if you said 3 children and 1 adult.
Yes.
and it was they said the adult has cancer. The three kids had some, I don't know, some disease that's common in children, and with the education, he was able to support 10 kids that don't have clothes or support for clothes and meals at home. Like, how happy would you get with that compared to just getting some, let's say, X amount of money went to army, X amount of money went to healthcare, blah, blah, blah. If they actually said the money you contributed has actually affected these 4 people, and some of those people may even let you or let people get in touch with them somehow. Obviously, that won't work all the case. But like, imagine if you could like see those children or see that adult whose life that you saved as a result of your tax.
Yeah, I mean, it would change your life.
Yeah,
heavily.
yeah, that would. I think that would be so much more positive. And I think I think there's 2 reasons why we don't see a proper breakdown. One, simply this country and a lot of the world does not have the system implemented to properly break down the logistics of everything. 2, they don't want to, because as soon as people start seeing where the money is really going, even if it's going, let's say, to healthcare or education, they start seeing that it's going to middle management, or it's going to something like, be like, why do they even need that admin person? Because obviously, just because it's going healthcare does not necessarily mean it's being used positively or effectively. But like, that's where I would like to see, be able to log on to, let's say, HMRC or some sort of government website, wherever you are in the world. It says, let's say you earned £20,000, £4,000 was paid in tax. Obviously, I know there's different types of tax, but let's just keep it simple. £4,000 was paid in tax, and that £4,000 went for these things, and this is what it was effectively allowed you to do. And imagine if you could have some sort of voting system where, let's say, 75% of your tax is distributed the way the government sees fair. But 25% of it, you can choose to put in what sector or field that you want. So if you was more passionate about education, you can say, I want the other 25%. So the other, did I say £2,000 or £2,000 was tax at 20,000? So £500 of that I wanted to go to education. Or if you really do support the military, £500 you wanted to go to the military. And then that would be a great way of seeing where people actually want their money to go to. Because, like I said, 75% of it the government distributes. Otherwise, there might be too much in one area and too less in one area. But if you see that remaining 25%, most of it is going to the military, then you can be like, okay, as a society, we clearly do value that. Therefore, that's not a bad thing that the government is spending around that. But if it turns out only 5% of the 25% goes to the military, and the other 95% goes to, let's say, education, healthcare, and helping old people, be like, clearly we're interested in more of those social programs than the other stuff. So I think that's something I would like to see with governments and change, and being able to see where our tax money is going. So yeah, we had a little quick discussion about Prince Philip. We'll circle back to the royals in future podcast episode as well. So this has been, is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up? Okay, so this has been episode 1 of the Just Average People podcast, where I basically just have a discussion with average people. Just want to say, when I say average people, I mean just people that you would see randomly on the street. You could go into any town, you meet someone like them or bump into someone like them. And more specifically, if you Google them, you probably wouldn't get much information about them. And there isn't a million other podcasts with them. So that's what I mean by average. Not necessarily by earning, more about they're not very well known, in a blunt way. So that's it. The first episode of the Just Average People podcast with my wife, Munna, who I call Mimi. And thanks for watching, or thanks for listening. Do you want to say bye-bye? Bye. So before we go, if you leave a 5-star review, any 5-star reviews left, I will read out in subsequent episodes. So I look forward to them, and I'll see you soon. Every Saturday we'll have the Just Average People podcast. Bye.